Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us on the award-winning To Hull and Back podcast, proudly sponsored by Kingfisher Quality Fish and Chips and Old Zoological Bar in Hull. I'm your host, Nathaniel, and tonight I'm joined by Joe, and then I think some stragglers might be popping up later on as well. So, Joe, good evening to you, although, of course, it could be good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're listening to this. We have an international audience, I think, as in we have like one follower from like Grimsby or something. So, Joe, how are you? And Ant's here as well. How exciting!
Yeah, hi. I'm not even going to come with an excuse for you. I was engrossed in Helldivers, and yeah, now I'm here. Let's ignore that.
Cool. Joe, what energy are you going to be bringing this to the podcast? Because I'm just depressed.
I am going to be bringing. This segues into addressing why it was postponed at the last moment yesterday. Will and I were at the under-21s. Will said he had nothing better to do that night and decided to go. I went because it's what I always do. And we witnessed basically Ant trying to scramble some pieces together to try and make a podcast on the group chat. And at half-time, whilst we were stood in the bar at Ferriby, we decided to join the StreamYard, and Nathaniel was ready and raring to go on a solo venture. But we decided for the greater good to do it tonight, where we've now got two of us alongside you, Nathaniel, and the energy I am running off is a 6-1 win for the under-21 and Ollie Green getting threatened to be knocked out by a member of Burnley's coaching staff.
Wonderful. I would have done a good job. I did a good job the first time I did a solo podcast. I think I would have done a good job this time. But you know who's not doing a good job at the moment? Hull City, without a win in 6 and losing the 2 games over Easter. That's why we've got Unhappy Easter as the name of the podcast. So, Ant, I mean, they're 6 points off with a game in hand, but are the playoffs realistically severely unlikely now?
I think so. I think obviously it's mathematically still possible, but when you look at it's not even just the last few games and whatnot. Our form over the course of the season, we've always been a nearly side, and we've probably said that for 2 years now. The base seems to be there. Something seems to be working. We're not taking anything away from the fact that obviously this season's been far more enjoyable than last, and last season was far more enjoyable than the one before. There is progression there, but the question is, for me at the minute, has there been enough progression based on the quality of personnel we've got? I mean, like I say, I think I've tweeted this before. I think pre-January, the squad we had, our expectations were quite happily top 10, being the question for the top 6, absolutely. That's a successful season. And then January comes around, we've signed some fantastic players. Yes, I know the injury to Liam Delap has a big factor in what we weren't able to do, but we've brought in so many players that Cavalier's won the league with Fulham. Zarori was a championship winner last season. Ryan Giles has had 20 plus assists from left back and has been one of the most coveted after players in a long time. You've got to think of these players that we've managed to lure into the club. And have we really benefited from January onwards? Have we looked any different to how we were before? I don't think we are. And I mean, it's weird because yes, we're in a better position. We're higher because we finished 15th last season. But to not realistically be finishing in the top 6 from what we are is a little underwhelming for me. And it's not to take away from the fact that it's been a decent season because we've been in the question, but it's just looking like it's going to fizzle out into nothing, which is a big disappointment, I think, for a lot of people. And Rosenior himself will say it's probably not the desired outcome after being so verbally positive for the entire season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree that I think we are in danger of that season fizzling out because, with a few games to go just before the Stoke game, we're getting excited for the run-in. And then I think after 2 defeats, probably less enthusiastic about that now. And here we go. We've got another fantastically special guest, James Hogarth of BBC Radio Humberside. Good evening, James. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Can you hear me okay? I'm testing a new microphone this evening.
Yes. Sounds lovely.
Nice to meet you, Nathaniel. Edit display name, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I thought it might catch some people out, maybe. So that's why I've gone for that. James, would you agree that it's been a bit of an unhappy Easter for City?
Yeah, clearly Good Friday was far from a Good Friday for Hull City fans and the club itself. And you could almost legislate for, I think, what happened at Leeds because of the quality that went into that performance, the passion and the energy that went in. If they hadn't have been beaten by Stoke City on Friday, I think all in all, that defeat just clouds everything else. And I think that's why so many fans are getting frustrated. And I've just come off air on BBC Radio Humberside this evening, and it's true. Fans are getting a little bit restless. I'm sure you'll ask me about sort of the Liam Rossini thing and kind of looking back, but certainly, yeah, it was far from a good Easter. And I think pretty much solely down, I think, to that Stoke City result.
Mm-hmm. It was pretty much typical City, the way they played at home and then infinitely better away. I mean, we didn't get a point at Leeds, but we controlled the game a whole lot better. Still struggle to create chances. But Joe, I think, does this weekend just show exactly what you've got with the home form and then the away form and the difference of performance there?
I said straight after the Stoke game that the home form this season is what's going to cost us a spot in the playoffs. And someone made the point on Twitter that you can't expect to be a serious contender in a race for the playoff. I've just seen that comment. Well, you can't expect to be a serious contender in a race for the playoffs at this stage of the season without winning at least half of your home games. We've played 20, won 7, drawn 7, and lost the remaining 6. So I think like I say, it's undoubtedly the home form that's cost us, and that was a problem last season as well for Liam Rossini. And that West Brom win last season when Benjamin Tete scored that brilliant goal and then got injured the next week, and Sean McLaughlin's header diverted in by Dara O'Shea. Rossini felt that was a statement win in terms of getting the monkey off the back, metaphorically, about winning games at home. And it feels like that monkey that got off the back has jumped straight back on again this season, because I'm not going to do it, but you can go through the list of home games and say, right, we should have picked up 3 points there, but we've only got 1. 3 points there, but we've only got 1. We shouldn't have lost that game and come out of it with a point instead. There are so many instances of that. And with home games especially, that shouldn't really be the case.
I mean, I'd probably be the sort of person to go through that list, but I'm not sure we've got enough time, actually. And what do you put that difference in the way we play down to? Because away from home, we're, I think, 5th in the division, and then at home, we're 12th, so on average.
I've been asking that question for the entire season. I think the problem is, I don't know, maybe a bit of naivety on Rossini's behalf. You know, it's easy to forget this is his first full season as a manager. Maybe a bit of complacency from our players. You know, some of the big players maybe not turning up often enough. It's been a tough season at home. I think the problem is when, you know, you're luring all these fans back. You know, we're getting big crowds again. The ownership, the manager, everyone's so verbally positive, you know, about where we want to go in terms of ambition. And it's great to hear. And then fans come to a stadium, and I've noticed progressively as the season's gone on, the atmosphere's got worse. And I think that's a sort of a symptom of the football being rather one-dimensional. We don't seem to have a plan B. It's just a case of, this is the way we're going to play. It works, trust me. And here we are, you know, with the end of the season coming up, and it's still not really worked. I mean, away from home, like we say, the better teams, even at home against the better teams, it does tend to work. Like, you know, we gave Leicester a good game, and we know how good we are away from home when teams come onto us. But we have to find a way, a different way of playing, a way to adapt, to try and break teams down when they do play this sort of solid, regimented, you know, sit back kind of formation that limits our space and limits our options, because we just seem absolutely clueless in the final third as to what to do to ask enough questions. We don't take enough risks. And I think when you're in a stadium full of people who are optimistic and you're in a top six chase, and then you're watching your centre backs play amongst each other for 10 minutes of a half, there's going to be no atmosphere because fans are reactive. Whatever's happening on the pitch, big tackles, chances created, they're the things that create atmosphere. And as the season's gone on, it's just it's dulled down, kind of like how the results have. It's just I can't quite put my finger on it. Obviously, Rosinia hasn't because we've not solved it. You can't really say we haven't got the quality on the pitch anymore because we have. I think the only real thing you can say that we've been desperately missing is Liam Delap for me.
Yeah, I think he's probably been a bigger miss than when Willigine came out of the team. James, I mean, we had a comment in there earlier that this season was just sort of for building. Do you think most of the frustration comes from the fact that January seemed so good and that we won the window with these players, Cavalier, Giles, Aruri, and then perhaps if we just had the team we had before January, if this had happened and it fizzled out, that would be more expected?
I think it's interesting because you roll back to the summer of last year, and all the talk was progress. Hull City had finished well above the relegation zone, but had battled against relegation all of last season, and the talk was all about this is not a team that's yet ready to challenge for a place within the playoffs, or certainly for automatic promotion. And I just wonder whether from the summer until Christmas, in the main, they did better than expected, which led to a slight reframing in January. Because you compare the two windows, there are a quantum jump between the two. And yes, I think from an observer's point of view, people will know I'm a Hull City fan anyway, but you look at the recruitment in the summer, Jason Lakilo, Vinagre, plays like that still added a bit of quality to the team. But compared to January, it was nothing like the quality. And I just wonder whether within the leadership at Hull City, there was a view taken that, heck, if we put on a run here, we could do better than expected. And I think that's the problem right now, is that fans have got slightly agitated, frustrated by what they've seen, because I think there's been a reframing since Christmas and since New Year. And suddenly the expectancy bar has been raised. If you kind of shone a mirror on yourself and look back at the summer and said, you will be supporting a club that could have finished anywhere between 6th and say 10th, 6th and 9th, you'd say, well, there you are. That's demonstrable progress. But because I think there's been this slump since January, and maybe the signings have all been marquee signings, but possibly haven't necessarily connected and gelled together, then suddenly people are saying, well, hang on a minute, things aren't working out necessarily as well as we would expect it. But I think hindsight's a wonderful thing.
That's a really good point you make there, James. I saw Burnsy make the point on Twitter that is the whole now smaller than the sum of its parts is. And Nathaniel, I had a look at the home and away table. Something interesting to note is we've scored as many goals at home as we have away from home in one more game, granted. But we've conceded 22 at home, conceded 29 away, yet have 30 points away and 28 points at home.
But I've put that on before. The problem is the majority of our goals have been scored across 4 games. So when we beat Rotherham 4-1, when we beat Cardiff 3-0, when we beat Blackburn 3-2, the 4 games we scored 14 goals. So I think it's something like 13 goals were then scored against the remaining 16 games. 13 goals in 16 games at home is abysmal for a side
it is
in the bottom half
right.
of the table, let alone charging for the top 6. That is where the issue is the goal scored. We don't kill teams off. We don't put games to bed. We don't score anywhere near enough. And we've said this every single game this season, barring the games where we've scored 4 or 3, that we create so many chances and don't put them away. And it's harsh to then obviously blame Rosinia or put any form of blame on the management, because it's the players ultimately that put the ball in the back of the net. But sometimes, like, you are watching games, and we do have games where we create chances, don't put them away. But there's some games where we just have a lot of the ball and do absolutely nothing with it. And you feel like they're maybe the games where if we'd have asked more questions and took more risks, that we might have scored more goals. But like James said, obviously hindsight, you're looking back on it and going, this is what cost us, this is what cost us. But we've obviously, as a side, as whatever Rosini's been doing with them on the training ground, it hasn't been proactive enough in an attacking sense that has got the best out of, these fantastic players that we've signed. Because like James says, pre-January, we'd have been absolutely ecstatic with where we are in the table. Absolutely. But then when you make the kind of signings we have in January, Fabio Carvalho, Ryan Giles, these are players that are not mid-table signings. No club makes them signings with the aim to be finishing in 10th or even lower. Like Cardiff can leapfrog us if they beat us on the weekend and we'll be 11th place. So, these players we're going for the top 6. That's where we want to be. And then it's just not come up on the pitch for whatever reason.
I think you also have to caveat this as well. You look at how many teams above Hull City are former Premier League clubs after Hull City exited the Premier League when they did. And I think, obviously, clearly the one standout is Ipswich, because they've done remarkably well with players like Luongo, for instance, who had a variety of different short-term spells at clubs in League 1 and 2, and suddenly now he's a well-established Championship player. Kieran McKenna clearly gets the best out of players. So they're an exception to the rule. In the main, the teams in and around those top echelon places either have the benefit of parachute payments or previously have had the benefit of parachute payments. So I think, again, I'm just to kind of play devil's advocate, you look and you think, well, actually, Hull City haven't had a parachute payment for a long time now. So actually, if they are flirting with 6th, 7th, 8th, without those parachute payments and still being able to bring in players like Carvalho and Zarore and Jadon Philogene, that's an achievement in itself. That's not to say it necessarily is working, but it certainly shows some level of achievement to get to this stage.
That's probably where the frustration comes, though, because probably the only difference, of course, Ipswich have had a whole year where they were winning games in League 1 to gel together as well, but this isn't Rossini's first season. That maybe the difference we have is maybe Rossini isn't as good a manager as Kieran McKenna, because he's got them playing the same sort of style of football with playing out from the back, but they just seem so much more direct. And you think sometimes Rossini needs to take the shackles off, because these players are, they have won divisions before, they have been promoted out of the Championship before and done well. So something's going wrong there. And I think it is that because we really went for it in January and we won the window, I think that's where most of the frustration comes from. Brad, still optimistic. Sunderland and Coventry were in a similar position to us last season and both made the playoffs. I think last year the playoff total for the team in 6th was probably lower than it's going to be this season. I think Norwich are probably just in such good form, they're probably going to finish above us. I suppose we'll touch on how they actually played in the Stoke game. Pretty dreadfully. What are people's thoughts on Noah Ohio? Because I know sometimes we thought, well, we need to play a striker, but then when we play a striker, they don't do very well. So we just sort of rotate between those two options. I thought his first touch several times was a bit poor. And then Rossini says they've not ruled out signing him on a permanent. So how did we think he did up front on Friday?
It's that last bit that's the strangest part for me, Nathaniel. He's played 91 minutes of Championship football all season. 3 strikers were sat on the bench against Leeds, and not one of them got brought on. One of those was Noah Ohio. Rossini spoke in the article Baz Cooper released, in which this information was revealed about us wanting to sign Ohio permanently, perhaps. And Rossini is still talking about getting him fit. He's been here for what? 2 months now. He's been on international duty as well and done well. If he's not fit enough and he's only played 91 minutes of Championship football, for me, you shouldn't be looking at signing him permanently, because it's obvious he doesn't trust him.
I think the transfers, in terms of things like that, what confuses me, and I was talking about this with my cousin and my mate who we went to the Leeds game with. If we knew that Liam Delap wasn't going to be available for a lengthy amount of time, right? Your choices are you send him back to Man City, unfortunately end his loan, but then look to bring him back in the summer maybe, or you gamble, which is what we've done, and hope that we're still within the playoff chase when he comes back into the side and helps get us over the line. Your risk there is that we've gambled and we might not even be in the playoff chase by the time he comes back, and we've sort of sacrificed that loan spot for him, whereas we could have been proactive, trying to get another player who's fully fit, ready to fire in, coming into the squad. Might not have been as good, but may have actually contributed more than someone like Billy Sharp, whose best years are definitely behind him, let's be honest. Noah Ohio's young, raw, obviously not up to the championship standard yet. And Connolly, who's made of glass. So you've got, it's for me, like, why are we bringing in players that aren't fit? If you know you've got Connolly, who's never really fit anyway, Billy Sharp, who's at the end of his career pretty much, why are we not looking at bringing in a player who's fully fit, ready and firing to get into the side? You know, someone that's been, you know, I'm saying this like there was one available, but surely if we're looking at these standard of players that we did, we could have found a goal scorer. I mean, look at how much did Al Amadi go to Ipswich for? I don't think it was that much, was it? So, you know, if rather than, you know, paying a lot of wages on some of these players, maybe pay a bigger fee for a striker just to try and get us over the line. I mean, it's just, for me, we talk about, I mean, Rosini said this before in interviews, we want to sign players that are robust, that are reliable, that can endure the championship season. And then we keep signing players like Vinagre as an example, Connolly. We keep gambling on players that aren't fit and can't be fit, and then wondering why we can't score goals in the attacking sense, because none of our attackers are ever fit. So we've got to a stage like we did last season where we're not playing natural strikers. And how do you expect to finish in the top six if you're not playing natural strikers on the pitch? Coventry have got Hadji Wright and Ellis Sims firing on all cylinders. You've got Norwich that have got Josh Sargent scoring, Gabriel Saras popping up with goals. The only player that's scoring for us at the minute is Cavalier. You can't finish in the top six if your number 10 is the only player scoring goals.
I think but you look at the argument. I suppose the argument there is that we hear regularly from managers and people within football saying how difficult it is, particularly with strikers, to sign a good striker in January because clubs aren't willing to release their better players. You've given the example of the two at Coventry. Of course, they were signed in the summer rather than in a January window. Maybe is that not the problem? Maybe, I mean, without asking that question directly of Tan Kessler and Liam Rossini, who's to say that the striker you gave the example there, the player from AFC Wimbledon, who's done incredibly well at Wimbledon and certainly scored a couple of goals since he joined Ipswich, who's to say they weren't after him and he fancied, because of course the other issue is of course location, isn't it? Because obviously Ipswich is that closer to London. He might not have had to uproot and move his family to too far. City obviously is that bit further up the country and maybe a bit of a harder sell, possibly. And then of course, as I say, you've got that flip side where people say it's really tough to bring in players, particularly strikers, in a January transfer window. And we know City were probably on the edge of FFP. Tan Kessler and Liam Rossini have spoken about that as well, which I think was one of the reasons why they didn't sign Callum Chambers in the end, because I think they were at the sort of at the very top level of what was left. So maybe Noah Ohio was an option and met the necessary criteria, possibly. I'm sorry, I don't want to monopolise this, but I think it's interesting, isn't it? City brought two players in January that would probably relish the kind of crosses that Ahmed El Mohammadi would swing in back in the day. When El Mohammadi was swinging those in, I suspect fans were probably keen for the football that we've seen elsewhere in the pitch this season from Irma and Carvalho and Zarore. So it's interesting, isn't it, that now I think fans want a bit of a player that can whip a ball in, that Ohio or Billy Sharp can get their head onto and attack. But back when Steve Bruce was doing that, I think fans wanted a bit more prettier football.
Yeah, that's the dilemma. I mean, I probably said it on the podcast. I don't remember whether I spoke about the Billy Sharp signing before or after it was announced. My initial gut reaction when we were going to sign Billy Sharp was that was a dreadful signing. I quickly turned that around. In hindsight's a wonderful thing, because I didn't want to be too down on a player that we've just signed, because you want to support your own team. But I mean, Rossini would never have gone anywhere near if he knew that Connolly and Dillap were going to get injured. Of course, you hope your players don't get injured. But I think Sometimes we've waited, like Philogene, we had to get him on the last day of the season, the transfer window, and same with Morton and a few other players on deadline day. Maybe if we'd waited till the end of the month to get the best possible player rather than someone who came in to not really play. He came in to be the third choice and know that he was going to be the third choice behind Delap, who had a great season, and then Connolly, who was then the joint top goal scorer, I believe. So, yeah, I think Billy Sharp's signing hasn't worked out. I mean, you'd think we wouldn't, have an issue with goal threat with the top Championship goal scorer of all time, but I guess it's just been because it's been around so long.
I think the problem is with the Billy Sharp signing is it's all well and good if you play, another striker alongside him, because Billy Sharp wants to, especially at this stage of his career where he's not going to be the most mobile of players. He needs to be in the box. You just have him in the box, put the ball in there, and then just hope it falls to him to put away. But our system doesn't allow that. So our number 9, as Liam Delap did so well earlier in the season, we know, in order to link the midfield to the attack, has to drop deeper, get the ball, link up play, bring wingers in, and create space. I mean, Delap used to run pretty much to the halfway line, collect the ball, and single-handedly run that ball all the way up to the opposition box, straight at defenders, scaring the life out of them. They had themselves backtracking to the goal, and that created space for the likes of Philogene and whoever was on the wing at the time to exploit. Billy Sharp's not going to do that. He's not going to drop deep, but he isn't playing with his back to the goal kind of striker. He's not going to hold the ball up. He's a poacher. He needs to be in the box, just getting on the end of things. And then the flip side of that is we don't really put the ball in the box. So we've got a striker, and we just don't play to what his strengths are at the minute. Definitely, we get the ball to the edge of the area instead of crossing it. We decide to turn around, go back to the fullback, and then go back into the middle and try and get around the other way. And then, in saying that, when he was watching us against Leeds, who are we crossing the ball to? Cavallio's not going to win any headers. Tufan's not the best in the air. And as number 10s, naturally, they're going to drop to the edge of the box for the fallout. So when we're crossing the ball, there's no one in there. The amount of Leeds fans that said to us after the game, if you'd have had a striker on that pitch, you'd have beaten us. Because the amount of balls you put into the box, there was no one there. So it's just one of those things where we seem to sign players that don't fit the system and then get confused as to why it don't work out. It's not Billy Sharp's fault. It's just the way we play. If Billy Sharp should have been a plan B option, but we don't really use a plan B.
Well, I think that's probably all we can say on strikers for the moment, because I'm sure we're going to have this conversation when we draw, the next few games as well.
When Liam Delap's hopefully back, of course.
Yes, it'll be lovely to have him back. I mean, I don't know how well he's going to play after being out for so long, but fingers crossed he does play well. So that's the front end of the pitch. I think the back end of the pitch with Ryan Alsop has been another sort of controversial figure at the moment. I am very much against the sort of scapegoating I've seen from him on Twitter. Yes, he's probably underperformed, and I understand Rossini is playing him because he adds to the distribution of the team. The main point of the goalkeeper is to keep the goal and keep the ball out of the goal. He's probably not been doing that to the best of his ability for a little while now. Where are we with Ryan Alsop? Is Pandor surely after a few months of training ready to come in and maybe just take Alsop out of the firing line for a bit?
I'm interested to know James's thoughts on this one. I know you've asked people on radio on the side. But
remember, I said I was on for 10 minutes, so I could just leave studio now because I know this is controversial. No, what I would say is I think we were talking about this. Mike White, the Hull City commentator for BBC Radio Humberside, our sports editor as well. We were talking about this on Monday night, and on when we were driving to the game on Monday. Mike rewatched that second goal against Stoke on Friday, and actually it does hit a bobble, which actually you can allow for the fact that probably caught Ryan Alsop out. Now, I think personally, and I'll just reflect, clearly there's a lot of people, the reaction we get on BBC Radio Humberside is predominantly fans who would like to see a change of goalkeeper. But what I'm interested in is the fact that this feels like that we've seen this all season. Matt, Ingram started, and there was a call for a change of goalkeeper then. Obviously, they had limited options then. Brought Ryan Allsop in. They were calling for Ryan Allsop to play. Ryan Allsop played. There were some issues. And now we're at the stage where people are calling for Pando to get a game. Now, unless you know your inner workings of Dutch football and your second team just happens to be Fortuna Sittard, or you were at that friendly, you were one of 50 people who were at the friendly against Curacao. I don't know how you can base that argument on probably on YouTube videos. I think it's inevitable that Ryan Allsop is at the moment causing some controversy because clearly he's a focal point in the team. I just wonder whether it's that kind of fans thing, isn't it? When someone's not playing well, you call for someone else to come in, and then you rinse repeat. It's not for me to say who should be in goal because I think to a certain extent Ryan Allsop, as you say, is a bit of a scapegoat because he's a half decent shot stopper and clearly not too bad distribution wise as well. I don't necessarily think the last couple of games it would be very fair to lay the blame at Ryan Allsop. And we had a text, and I mentioned this on Sports Talk earlier on. Someone actually sort of put some level of blame on Ryan Allsop for that third goal, but against Leeds. But hang on a minute,
No.
You can't, because he was doing his job at that moment, which was to try and influence the second equaliser, and it was a freakish set of circumstances and a nice piece of technical ability from Dan James. So for me, I'm not so sure the issue is Ryan Allsop right now.
Yeah,
I think the third goal point, James, is a really interesting one. I've said over and over again, I have absolutely no problems with the third goal whatsoever. You can't expect Allsop to save the penalty. Ultimately, if you're a goalkeeper and you stand down the middle, he puts it either side of it, you look ridiculous because you've not picked a side. And like you said, he's been sent up to chase the equaliser. If that corner gets whipped in, he heads it into the back of the net. It's a stroke of genius of him going up there, Rossini allowing him to go up there. We've got a point at Leeds. Cool. But then the flip side of that is the corner isn't straight to him, which it wasn't, and the sort of second delivery of the ball into the box wasn't near him either. And you've got him rushing back to try and stop a third goal. That's the
risk. Anytime a goalkeeper goes up, you're already losing. So to blame the goalkeeper at that point for the loss is ridiculous. If they can see,
it's ridiculous. He couldn't do anything about the first goal. It was point blank range. He did well just to stop it, and ultimately, it's the fault of the defence and those who gave the ball away, those who perhaps didn't track back, whatever, circumstance dependent for the reason that ball was headed into the back of the net by Sam Byram. That's not Allsop's fault. And I think it was Paul on Facebook who put the comment in. Panda will be our number one eventually. You don't spend £1.5 million in January on a goalkeeper for him to just sit on the bench for his entire stint at the club.
What I think he's done is he's brought Panda in January in order to give him like these few months to sort of embed himself into the country, get to know the players and the squad and the style of play properly, and come into the squad relatively without pressure at the start of next season. I do think he's planned to be next season's number one. The only problem is like I think Allsop's issue at the minute is his confidence. I think because if you remember when he first came in, he was making some really good saves. And he got man of the match, I think, twice in his first 5 games or something like that. We were all saying, what signing it is. But I think after a couple of mistakes, as a goalkeeper, maybe he's overthinking his positioning, or he's maybe been a bit rash with going to the ball too early or something like that, not being strong enough with his hands. There have been a few goals that have gone in that you think, maybe he should have done better there. But realistically, if we'd have had Ingram in goal, we say he's not good enough distribution-wise. And then we want also back in goal, like James was saying. We just kind of, I think the problem is that for a few years now, we've kind of had 2 goalkeepers at least in the squad that are first team standard. And we keep rotating based on the needs of the squad at the time and the style of play. So from what I've heard from Fortuna Sittard fans, I mean, Fortuna Sittard Central, they follow us on here and they're quite vocal, and they say he's one of the best young goalkeepers they've had. He's a Croatian under 21. He's really highly thought of. I think he got player of the season, team of the season, last year. So, he's obviously got something about him, but we can't sit here safely and say that he's really good distribution-wise because, like James said, we haven't seen him play. We can go off what other people have said and his previous fans, but if we went off what previous fans said about every player, quite a few that come to our team from previous sides that said are awful, it turned out to be quite good. So we've just got to wait for next season and see what, obviously, Pandey does, what the plan is with Allsop, because I think, obviously, Ingram will be on his way out in summer. And then just, hope that we've got a more improved style of player that's maybe a bit more adaptable, that the goalkeeper isn't under so much pressure all the time.
And remember as well, goalkeeping wise, Lota Tyler's out on loan at Doncaster at the moment. He's had a good few games recently, I think.
He apparently made an absolute worldie of a save.
Oh, I've watched it. It's a worldie save, 97th minute, incredible save to keep it 1-0. Harvey Cartwright's out on loan at Grimsby, of course. He's had relatively positive reviews there. Am I correct in thinking, James?
Yeah, the only downside is that it looks like he's picked up an injury against Bradford on Monday, and that could be it for the season for him. We asked Sean Pearson, the club's assistant head coach, after the game against Bradford on Monday, and he said, and I can't remember I think it was a quad injury, but it looks like it could be serious enough to rule him out for the rest of the season, which would be a real shame for his development. And you don't necessarily want players to be involved in a relegation battle, I imagine. But let's be honest, by being in a relegation battle as he is at Grimsby, he's seeing a lot of the ball. So, he's seeing a lot of the ball in terms of trying to save it. So I think that's probably done his confidence the world of good. And of course, you've got David Robson as well. If you're really deep diving on the goalkeeping, he's gone out on loan, I think, to Gainsborough, hasn't he? So, but yeah, Harvey Cartwright, by all accounts, done very well at Grimsby. Cartwright
was another one last season as well. He had a loan at Peterborough that was disrupted by injury, then coming in at Wickham in January. It was always going to be hard going in January to try and get that. There's only one goalkeeper ultimately. Panda's found that out this season. And well, we'll see what next season brings, I suppose. But like you say, Ant, I think Ingram will definitely be on his way out. And it's a shame for him that he started the season as number one and now he's firmly third choice goalkeeper. It's a shame, but to quote Ingram himself here, it's the politics of football.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think as we start to look forward, I don't know whether we're looking forward to the game, but looking into the future to the match at the weekend, I showed an image there of Ryan Allsop, who's played for both clubs. One of 3 Hull players who have done that. I think Ryan Giles, he was on loan at Cardiff, potentially picked up an injury. I don't know if he's going to play, but here is another one. Jayden Philogene, he was on loan there last season at Cardiff City, and Allsop potentially out of form. Is Jayden Philogene out of form as well? Because I've seen some criticism of him. Still a very technically gifted player, but as the likelihood that we're going to be in this division increases game on game, the likelihood we're going to be able to sell him for more money than if we went up with the Aston Villa buyback clause increases as well. So thoughts on Jayden Philogene, because annoying to be critical of him, but has he been at the best to his ability last few games?
Simple answer to that's no.
Yeah, I think
no.
He has been disappointing. I did put it down initially to Zaroury being brought in, playing on the left and shifting Philogene from where I think he's most effective onto the right-hand side, and then him having a couple of bad spells in that position and losing confidence and to being where it is. But now he's starting to think, you're looking at a couple, at least one of the Stoke goals was him not tracking his man. And then I was watching him against Leeds and he was, rarely tracking his man and supporting the left back at the time. So, and he played in his favoured left position as well. So there wasn't really any defence for him. Sometimes maybe attitude, I'd like to think it isn't. I just think that maybe he had such a good first 6 months that we've put him on some sort of pedestal that if he even drops slightly below it, that we're always going to be, what's wrong with him kind of thing. Like he can't be a well beater every single week. He really wouldn't be in the Championship, would he? He's just in a bad spell. Somerville's been in a bad spell for Leeds. I'd like to think that if he gets a goal, Jayden will be back up and running. Because these kind of flair players do thrive off confidence and self-belief, and that's why he was flying in the first few months of the season, because he just backed himself. Every decision he made, the Rabona at Rotherham, all them kind of things, that's a player that fully thinks I can do this and I'm going to do it. Whereas now he might be second guessing himself. And as we've seen, he gets to run goals sometimes and maybe takes one too many touches or passes it when he sort of should shoot or something like that. So I think he's just in a bit of a confidence rut. Gets the goal, he'll be back up and running. But like you say, I think the chances of us holding on to him next season are probably slim to none anyway. I think we will lose him in Greaves personally, but let's just see if he can. I mean, him and Cavalier, they're going to have to be the ones that step up from now to the end of the season if we're going to have any chance of the top six. So hopefully he reignites himself against his former club, as players tend to do.
Yeah, indeed. Perfect game perhaps to get back in form. Has the Rabona goal gone to his head?
I don't think so.
I was
Like
going
you
to
said,
mention this. Do we think people are saying that it's the Premier League links that have got to his head as well? I'm not really sure what I make of that, but I interrupted you, Ant. Keep going.
No, I mean, I don't think so, because I think, as we've seen, I think one of the good things you can say with absolute certainty about Rosenior is that he has a very good judge of character. As we saw with Ebuwe that came in last season, if your attitude isn't par and it looks like you don't give a damn, you won't play. Yet Jadon's still starting games. You can maybe argue that Jadon's a bit too good to drop in the circumstances of the season, but I'd think if the Rosenior had noticed, he's probably had a word with Jadon about his confidence and trying to get him, reinvigorate his man-to-man management's pretty good. I'd like to think that he hasn't had his head turned. I mean, as fans, you've got to. I just think that, like I say, I just think he's in a confidence rut. I think he's just got to do something well, start backing himself again, and then hopefully from now to the end of the season we have an on-fire Philogene that at least gets us back into the chase, so we have something to play for at Plymouth away. But no, I'm not going to question his attitude yet. I don't think. I think he's only been here a year and we've already made him pretty much God, and then now he's enemy number one. You see, it's been a bit of a tumultuous couple of months for him, I think.
But don't you think that this is and this might be the same discussion point around the Liam? We've seen a lot of reaction today to Liam Rosenior's nomination as manager of the season, that people are very quick to be really quite cuttingly critical now. And yes, one great thing about social media and forums like this now is that you can have an opinion and you can express it, and you can dissect things more than back in the day when there was a clunky website forum and a local radio phone in, and that was probably about your lot. But I've just seen a message come in there. Isn't there an argument to say that he isn't? Aston Villa probably wouldn't have let him go if he was consistently a 10-on-10 player doing incredible things week in, week out. Of course they wouldn't, but they probably were slightly probably aware that he might drift in and out of games. And I do genuinely think Mike and Swanee have pointed this out on commentary a lot recently, that since Zaroury has been brought in, he's been shifted from left to right. He does look less effective on the right-hand side. And I think we actually got an example of that on Monday against Leeds. He was actually doing some good things on that left-hand side, shooting, he was involved. Yeah, okay, a couple of times maybe could have tracked back possibly, but switched to the right in the second half. Did he not necessarily show that maybe the right-hand side isn't his best position? So, yeah, could be a slump in form, could be a confidence thing, but equally, is it also a positional thing?
Yeah, I've said, and because I've also got a membership this season, we've said every single game, the transfer of, I don't know why you would bring a player in like Zaroury to play him on the left and to get rid of your best performing player and take him out of his best position to accommodate a new signing. That to me was bizarre. I know maybe Benson was perhaps the number one target because he would have played off the right because he's left-footed, which meant that Philogene could have stayed on the left. And like James said, maybe availability, cost, everything like that. It just meant that Zaroury was the only one available. But it just seems bizarre to me as a signing to remove your best player whilst in form from his best position and shift him elsewhere to accommodate a new player who has to then bed in, form new connections. And as we've seen from Zaroury, I'd be pretty disappointing so far. He's got a tap in against Southampton. He had a good goal against Leicester, but arguably probably the only thing he did in that game. So it's It's quite bizarre. And like I said, the confidence thing probably comes with being shifted from there. He's maybe saying, well, why? Because I was doing my thing there, like just play somebody else on the right kind of thing.
I suspect there's the equal as well. I suspect that Ted Lasso had "believe" above the dressing room wall. I suspect in the dressing room at Hull City, and I'm joking here, but I suspect that the sign "believe" is replaced with "you can't have enough wingers." And I do genuinely believe that, and I think observationally, I do think there's probably an argument to say that Liam Rosenior likes to pack his squad out with wingers, so he's not out of depth when it comes to wingers. Had things have worked out differently, I suspect Raksaki would have been signed as well. We know he was a target. So I wonder whether that's, Zarore came in because, as I say, you can't have enough wingers. And I suspect Liam Rosenior didn't want to go into that final set of games in the end of the close season with any hint of there being a problem around availability for those positions. And maybe, unfortunately, as a result, circumstance dictated that the player he brought in also slotted into the same place where Jayden Philogene was doing his best work. Maybe that's possibly one of the reasons.
Yeah, certainly could be that. So, as mentioned there earlier, and you said it, Cardiff are just a few points behind us. We are much better away from home. I mean, we had those 3 games at home, and I wasn't really optimistic about those. I mean, I think with the Birmingham one, I was a little bit more optimistic, but with the home performances, didn't really help having 3 games at home that we drew in a row. So Cardiff away, I think I'll be looking at this game with more interest if Ipswich do us a favour and win at Norwich earlier on in the game. So how do we see this one going, and what changes would we make to the lineup? I'll go to you first, Joe.
Oh, put me on the spot. I'm not going to say pandering goal. I think it will happen eventually, but I don't think it'll happen now. We obviously don't know about Louis Coyle and Ryan Giles. I suspect the way Giles went down, that injury isn't a pretty one. And I'd also suspect that Louis Coyle will be rested just because he went down a couple of times with that. And one Leeds fan on Twitter was trying to suggest that it was time wasting and they see it every week when our 2 first choice fullbacks went off injured. Is the captain going down and being forced off through injury something that they see every week, as that fan was insinuating? Whatever. I think Slater will stay at right back because although he gave the penalty away, I think he still had a good game. I think Matty Jacob will come in at left back. Greavesy will come back in at centre back alongside Alfie Jones. Seri, Morton, Carvalho midfield 3. I think he'll keep the main 3, the front 3 the same as well, with Ozan, Tufan through the middle, Abdushamir wide right, and then Philogene on the left. I think the only changes he'll make will be enforced ones, because that performance at Leeds, it wasn't bad. I still would like to see Aaron Connolly start, because ultimately, surely the aim of football should be to have the players on the pitch who've scored the most goals for you, and Aaron Connolly has scored as many as Ozan Tufan and Jayden Philogene have this year, 8 goals apiece for all 3 of them. And since his wipeout at Norwich, he's hardly had a look in. That game for the 21s was meant to be one to get his fitness back, but if he's still not fit enough, what's going on there? So I think the only changes he'll make will be ones he's forced to make through injury. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Zaruri has done much to get in over a moment or 2. I think their link-up play has been very nice. James, would you make any changes?
I can't disagree with Joe, to be honest with you. And I think, barring the injuries, and we had a good view from the John Charles West.
James, You just accidentally hit the mute button, mate.
Did I?
Yeah.
You'd think I'd know, really, wouldn't you, about microphones and things? Yeah. We had a good view of whilst we were watching the Louis Coyle injury. I spotted that Ryan Giles was having his thigh strapped, his right thigh. So that looked like the sort of thing that might take a while to recover from. So I think I would say you're absolutely right. And actually, those players, that apart from the injuries, those players 1 to 11. Squad numbers aside, I think they justified the same the level of work, and Liam Rosenior in his post-match interview said how they'd performed to his tactics, and tactically how good they were in terms of what he wanted from them and how they played. And I think that starting 11, barring obvious changes for injuries and the return of Jacob Greaves, has justified it being kept the same. I think we would have seen a striker come on. I think we would have seen Aaron Connolly, Billy Sharp, Noah Ohio come on. He just didn't have the substitute windows to do it, because obviously
we've lost 2 stops, haven't we?
Because those 2 slots were taken with injuries. In the middle of that was Zarore, and at that point it was 1-1. You were probably not going to throw a striker on then, because you'd be criticised for doing so, and if they'd gone up the other end of the pitch and scored the winner.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I definitely think Omer on the right and Philogene on the left is our strongest wing combination.
Agreed.
I think for me, Abdush is the first name on the team sheet. Obviously with Louis Coyle off, I love him as a player. His work ethic off the ball, creativity, his ability on the ball to sort of drift in and out spaces. I think Slater came in for some unfair criticism. He was playing out of position against arguably the best winger in the league, and very, very rarely got put in any one-on-one situations. I know both times probably resulted in a goal. The first one, Somerville got on the outside of him, had a shot, and it palmed up to, obviously, for Byron to head in. And the second one, rash challenge, maybe bring him down outside the box. But listen, Somerville's fantastic, really fast. You're going to get caught like that sometimes, and it was unfortunate for him. But no, obviously, we're quite limited in right back at the minute. I'd rather have Slater there than Christie. So, yeah, and obviously Greavesy comes back into the side. I don't know. Did he mention why he didn't play McLaughlin against Leeds? Because that was quite a strange one. But no, yeah, Mike Jacob will come into the side as well. But the rest of the side, yeah, probably unchanged for me, because I think Morton as well had come off the boil, I think, in recent weeks, and that assist was fantastic. That work rate and the run he did. I think that'll do his confidence a world of good. So, and you want them kind of players in your team, like your Morton, Sarah, and Cavallo in the middle. It's really good link-up play, especially with Omer, and letting Jaden have that space on the left-hand side as they're doing intricate passing. And Tufan, I think, was one of the best players on the pitch as well against Leeds, and ran himself into the ground as he usually does. So, yeah, just the enforced changes for me.
Can I say, by the way, that if in a year's time the 2 players we're looking back on for this January transfer window are the permanent signings of Abdush Irma, and then potentially in the summer Ryan Giles becoming a permanent signing, I still think that we'll be saying that Hull City won the transfer window, because Abdush Irma now looks like the player that supposedly Manchester City and Liverpool had looked at. Now, I'm not saying for 1 minute he's at that level, but you can see why he would have been scouted. And I know Mike and Burnsy have called him the Turkish Messi. I've had a Turkish Messi, by the way. It's a good place down Cottingham Road for that. But I've done that joke before. But you can see why, can't you? You can see why he's been dubbed that, because if he is an example of where they got that transfer right, and I think you'll look back on January 2024 and say, Ryan Giles, Abdush Irma, absolutely what that squad needed.
Yeah, and I think the important thing about Abdush and what's really sort of refreshing about that transfer is he was probably the one that we expected the least from, or at least had the most skepticism out of it, because it was an unknown transfer really from Turkey that none of us really knew anything about. And we thought, maybe it's one of those kind of signings that we've made where, a few of them haven't worked, like Cynic.
I was just going to say the risk of him being another Cynic, yeah.
Yeah, but it sounds like, all the good things being said before it was like, obviously he was telling his club he wanted to come here, he really wanted to come here and prove himself, and that kind of desire, and players physically telling their clubs, this is a place that's a dream, I want to go over there and play and prove myself, and then he's come in and he's sort of practiced what he's preached. You know, every single time he's been on that pitch, you cannot question for 1 minute his effort, his grind, and his desire to play and do well for the club. And maybe having someone like Ozan Tufan to help him settle in sort of benefited as well. But yeah, I think Omer's been a fantastic signing. And the worrying thing about Giles was that when he walked by us, because I know you were there, Joe, when he walked by the front of us and we all clapped him off, he looked quite dismayed, which tells me that he's probably going to be out for a while, which is
I said it to camera at the time, and I said he looks gutted.
Yeah, it usually, because obviously if it's only a minor knock, he'd have been, you know, probably joining in with fans. We know what Giles is like personality-wise. He's been a bit of a jack the lad, hasn't he? So for the fact that he walked in front of us and just looked completely heartbroken, to me, just said that. I mean, it might just be because he wanted to see out the game and was enjoying himself, but that to me on his face said, "Oh, I don't know when I'll be back," kind of thing. But hopefully, I'm wrong.
On fullback watch, both Brandon Fleming and James Furlong played for the under-21s last night against Burnley. Furlong was steady, didn't really have a lot to do. Brandon Fleming, however, saw a lot more of the ball, got forward really well, and looked impressive. Yet Burnley had, I think, 6 or 7 under-18s on the pitch, and Brandon has been a professional for a few years. But still, he hasn't had a lot of minutes this season, and to step into that straight away and show that he's still got it is a statement. But do I think it'll mean anything? Unfortunately not.
It's a shame because he has looked like a good player even at this level, but I think he's been very unfortunate with injuries recently. I suppose I'll just get a Cardiff City, Hull City prediction off all of you. I mean, Will's not here. He'll be saying 3-0 City.
3-0.
Joe, I'll go to you first.
Head tells me another draw, but my heart tells me, Joe, you're an optimist. Do something in that vein. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the latter and say back to winning ways. The Leeds performance, give them belief. 2-1.
Yes. And
I actually think it's going to suit us on the weekend. As we know, we're better away from home. I think Cardiff are on a good run of form at the minute, and you know, got a really good win. Was it Coventry last time they played? You know, it's a side that's directly challenging us for the top 6. But I think that confidence will lead to them, you know, really coming on to us, which is obviously what suits us more. And I think we might just sort of reignite some sort of optimism going into the final few games with a win. So yeah, I'm going to say we don't score many, so I'm just going to go for 1-0. I think a rare clean sheet.
James?
Well, I'm going to go 2-1 as well for a game you can hear if you're not going on 95.9 FM on Saturday. 2 o'clock start, 3 o'clock kickoff. I think a 2-1 win to Hull City personally.
Nice. I'm going to say 3-0 Cardiff. Well, thank you everyone.
Nice one, Nathaniel.
Today, you know, lots of comments. We've got Ian Templeman 2-0, I assume, to Cardiff as well, of course, obviously. James, you've been a fantastic guest.
Thank you. It's very kind. And Ant, I'm going to point that way. Oh, hang on, that way. Ant has asked me before many times to come and join you. It's been a pleasure, and I'm more than happy to come back on and share any views you want from anywhere from me at any time. But yeah, thank you for asking, and I'm just sorry I got the world's worst jumper on tonight.
We can't see it, so it's all good.
It's a podcast.
James told me that he was only going to come on for 10 minutes. He's still here.
I know. I've got to walk the dog now.
Okay, well, we've been the To Hull and Back podcast. Thanks for commenting in, listening and liking. And we'll be back after a really dismaying, horrible away performance at Cardiff. So,
win.
Ta-ra, everyone.